Greetings from Brother Stephen. I'm a disciple and witness of Jesus Christ. To all the inhabitants of the earth, I present to you as a witness the gospel of the kingdom. In this lesson today, titled The Serpent Story, we're only going to be going over Genesis chapter 3, verses 1, particularly the word serpent. And just one of the things I want you to remember is that Genesis chapter 3 does not take place until 16,000 years after creation. But first, we're going to read Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 of that King James Version, Oxford edition of 1769. And it reads, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made." And again, the main thing we're focusing on in this lesson is this word, the serpent. And a few things we're going to try to answer as we go through this lesson is, who is the serpent? What is the serpent? Why is he called the serpent? Where does the serpent come from? How does the serpent gets to earth? And when, and actually we already kind of answered, when does all this take place? And again, all this take place approximately 16,000 years after creation. And we go over that in this last lesson. Now, to begin to answer the questions, some of those questions, who, what, when, where, why, and how, we're going to go to Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 through 23. I'm reading from my translation of 2019, and I go over these subsections of scripture in the study titled The Fifth Day, when Elohim created fishes and birds. And that's Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 through 23. It says, "And Elohim said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving nephesh." If you don't know what nephesh is, you need to go back to the YouTube channel and scroll down to the video titled Nephesh. It explains exactly what nephesh is and why I use it in my translation. It says, "that have life, and birds that may fly above the earth in the open atmosphere of the sky. And Elohim created great serpents and every living nephesh that swim." And again, that word nephesh just means the physical body that is created from soil. It's our physical body, not the breath that is in our body. Just like the animal is a living creature, all man is a living creature. Just like sometimes the scripture uses a living soul for human beings, but that would apply to animals also, that animals are a living soul. They use the word creatures for animals and the word soul for human beings, but that word creature and soul come from the same Hebrew word nephesh. So I took out creature and soul and I added in nephesh so people can know there's no distinguish between the creature and the soul. And again, I'll explain that in greater detail if you go back to that lesson titled nephesh. Again, so which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged bird after their kind, and Elohim saw that it was good. Now, the main thing we're going to focus on here in this lesson is this term created dinosaurs, serpent. This means he created huge snakes. And this word serpent comes from the Hebrew reference number 8577. Now, this next image here is just an image to show that back in the beginning, there's evidence of dinosaur serpents, because we have the actual dinosaur skeleton of these great serpents that Elohim created in the beginning. Now, the next thing we're going to do, like always, well, if this is your first time tuning in to one of my videos, we're going to go, if you go to the internet and Google Blue Letter Bible and open up their website, This should pop up on your screen somewhere. We're going to do a search the Bible for the word serpent. And after you type serpent, we're going to click search. Then the next thing we're going to do is click on the Strong's Concordance. After you hit search, every time the word serpent appears in the Bible, all the verses is going to pop up, but then we're going to hit Strong's. And once you click on Strong's, a green arrow should pop up. And basically what will pop up on your screen next is it's going to open the Hebrew reference number for every word or term translated in that King James Version Bible. Now this is Genesis chapter 3 verses 1 when it says now the serpent. And as you can see, this word serpent comes from the Hebrew reference number 5175. So now I have to scroll back up really quick to show you this word serpent from Genesis chapter 1 verses 21 come from a totally different Hebrew reference number, and it is because it is talking about two different kind of serpents or snakes. So when you, after you open up your Strong's Concordance, we're going to click on H5175 to open up the Strong's dictionary or lexicon. And after you open up that after you click on this reference number, this should pop up on your screen somewhere. And this is again that Hebrew reference number 5175. And this is the Hebrew word. This word serpent in Genesis chapter 3 verse 1 is translated from. And you will pronounce this in Hebrew, Nakash. Now, what is Nakash? To understand what Nakash is, we're just going to another verse. This is Job chapter 26, verse 13. It says, but his spirit, or by his breath, he hath decorated the heavens. He decorated the heavens with the constellations. His hand hath formed the crooked serpent, or the crooked Nakash. Now, what is this crooked serpent, or this crooked Nakash? This is referring to the constellation that we call Serpent, Serpens, but the Hebrews call this constellation Nakash. And again, we go over this in details on how he created the constellations and called them all by names in the lesson titled The First Day Light when we covered Genesis chapter 1 verse 3. So again, that Hebrew word Nakash, that serpent is translated from Genesis chapter 3 verse 1 is really Nakash. It is talking about the constellation Nakash, or the constellation Serpens. Now, why is this character in Genesis chapter 3 verse 1 called Nakash? Is because this constellation represents him. And this is why he is called Nakash in Genesis chapter 3 verses 1. Now we're going to go over a few verses to kind of explain that. The first one is Amos chapter 9 verse 6. It says, it is he that established his stories in the heavens. So this Nakash that we're reading about in Genesis chapter 3 verses 1, he has a story in the constellations. And we're going to go over that story today so you can understand why this constellation is called Nakash and why this entity in Genesis chapter 3 verses 1 is called Nakash. He has a story in the heavens. Now, to confirm this with New Testament scripture, and also when you go to Matthew chapter 6 verses 10, and this is Jesus Christ speaking, he says, your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as in heaven. And when I say as in heaven, as it is established in the heavens. So just the like Amos chapter 9 verse 6 says, he establishes stories in the constellations. Christ is saying, let your will be done on earth as it is in the constellations. God pretty much tells his whole story on that first day when he creates the constellations. And this is why you hear about seers and astrologers who read the heavens so they can be able to predict the future. You can't predict everything, but you can predict God's will, and you can learn to read his story by studying the constellations. So now we're going to Genesis chapter 1, verses 14, and it reads, "And Elohim said, let there be a solar system in the atmosphere of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs." So on the fourth day, when Elohim created the solar system and the planets that orbit the sun, he created them so we can be able to read the constellations. And this is actually one of those signs in this image here, because as you can see, you have the constellation Nakash, you have the constellation Virgin, and then you have some of those planets that orbit the sun. You have Jupiter, you have the moon, and so on. So the next thing we're going to do is we literally jumping straight to the book of Revelations, because if you go back to Amos 9:6, where it say, "It is he who establishes stories in the heavens." We just talked about how Nakash has a story in the heavens. So we're finna jump to Revelations chapter 12, verses 3 through 4, so we can read that short story, Nakash's or the serpent's story that is in the Bible. And again, this is Revelation chapter 12, verses 3 through 4, and this is my translation of those verses. It says, "And there appeared another sign in heaven." Again, this sign is referring to the same sign back in Genesis chapter 1, verses 4, when he said he created the solar system, all those planets that orbits the sun, let them be for signs. Now we're finna read, now when you get to Revelation 12, chapter 3, "And there appeared another sign in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon." Now this great red dragon in the book of Revelations is the constellation Serpents. And I'm going to explain that to you in a second. It says having 7 heads. So if you scroll back up, this is the constellation Serpents, and his 7 heads are the 7 stars that make up the crooked Nakash, or the crooked serpent. And 10 horns. I have a question mark here because I don't know what these 10 horns represents in the stars. But we're going to continue reading. It says, "And 7 crowns upon his head." This is the constellation Corona Borealis. So if you go right above the constellation Nakash, he has a constellation of 7 stars above his head, and this is in this constellation we call Corona Borealis, or the 7 crowns. Verse 4 says, "And his tail," and I'm going to scroll back up here because his tail is only talking about these 4 stars, not the head of the serpent, "drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman." So again, there's that dragon, because this is the constellation Nakash, standing before the virgin. So this is how you know it's talking about astrology. It says, "which were ready to be delivered, for to devour her child, and her child is Jupiter as soon as it was born." So when we scroll back up, as you can see, Jupiter is just coming out of the legs of Virgo after being in the stomach of Virgo for 9 months. I talk about this in earlier studies, but if you look in an encyclopedia of, I think if you Google Revelations 12, 1 through 2 prophecy, this will come up in an encyclopedia, and it will take you to a date of September 23rd, 2017, when this star alignment happened in the constellations. But I'm going to continue. So again, Revelations chapter 12, verses 3 through 4 is the story of Nakash. Now, Finna do something a little different so we can understand what the serpent was in the book of Genesis. When you go back to Genesis chapter 3 verses 1, when it says, now the serpent, it is calling him the serpent because the constellation serpent, or the constellation of Cash, in Revelations chapter 12 verses 3 through 4 represents this entity. Now, to figure out exactly what type of animal or thing this is, if you go to Revelations chapter 12 verses 3 through 4, when it says, and there appeared another sign in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. The reason they're referring to the constellation Nakash as a great red dragon is because he, in Genesis chapter 3 verses 1, he is a great red dragon. Only thing they do in Genesis to Revelations is they switch the great red dragon with the serpent. Because in Genesis chapter 3 verse 1, he was actually a great red dragon. In Revelations chapter 12 verses 3, he's actually the constellation Nakash. So in the beginning, the serpent is not a snake. He's a great dragon. And we're going to continue to confirm this with scripture as we go through this lesson. One of the first things I want to point out is when you go back to Revelations chapter 12 verses 3, it says, and there appeared another sign in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. I want to focus on this word red really quick, and the reason I'm focusing on it because I just want to let you know that it is a false translation. This word should not be translated as red. The first thing I'm going to do is give you a little proof. If you go to Hebrews chapter 11 verse 29, where it says, by faith they passed through the Red Sea. This is referring to like that same color red. But as you can see, it is translated from a different Greek reference number. Now, when you go to this Greek reference number 2063, this is the Greek word for red. This word red is not translated from this Greek word. Now, if you click on G4450 on that app, the Blue Letter Bible, this is the Greek word that word red was translated from. Now, when you take this Greek word and you translate it into English, it is not red. It is russet. Now, you probably never heard of russet, but I'm going to give you 3 different descriptions of russet. This is like a russet wall. As you can just see, different colors from red, brown, blue. This is a russet apple. The russet apple, same thing, have different colors from red to yellow to orange to green. Now, this is a russet color car. And the reason I'm showing you all 3 of these, because I'm not trying to say this is russet, this is russet, this is russet. Right now, I'm just opening up your mind so you can understand that russet is not just a red color. So that is a false translation. It should say russet here in verse chapter Revelations 12 and 3. It should say, and a great russet dragon, not red. Now, this next 2 verses is just to confirm what I just told you, that in the beginning, that serpent was a great dragon. And you can, in Revelations 12 and 9, confirm that, and also Revelations chapter 20 and verse 2. It says, and the great dragon was cast out. This Revelations 12 chapter 9 is referring to what happened to the serpent in the book of Genesis after he deceived the woman. And a great red dragon, that's that serpent, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan. So now we also know that that entity in the beginning called the serpent is also the devil, and it is Satan. And Satan in the beginning was a great dragon. It says, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, when you go to Revelations 20:2, it says the same thing. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old Nakash, which is called the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Now, there's two things we're going to look into since we're talking about the story of the serpent. We're going to look into the root word or etymology of devil and of Satan, so you know exactly what they mean. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the Greek reference number 1228. And when you click on this, on that blue letter Bible, as you can see, the word devil is translated from the Greek word diablos. And diablos is actually an English word. So this should not even say devil. This should say which is diablos. Now, in order to figure out what diablos is, we're going to study the root word or the etymology of diablo. So we're going to click on this word diablo, which is the Greek reference number 1225. And again, this is diablo. And it says diablo is root word come from dia and belo. So we're going to look into dia and belo so we can figure out what diablo mean, so we can figure out what diablos mean. Now this is dia, and all I'm doing is scrolling down to the Strong's definition, because they use this word dia for several words: after, always, among, at, to, avoid, because, briefly, by. So these are all the words that we could kind of translate the Greek word dia into. Just so you know, I'm sticking with this word because for a reason. You'll see why. So because. Now we just going back up. That's dia. Now we finna look into that Greek word belo. And as you can see, belo means more or less violent or intense, arise, cast out, dong, lay. So these are all the different words that belo is kind of used for, or can be kind of translated into English. And again, I'm sticking with cast out. So I'm saying belo is because dea is because, and belo, when it refers to dea belo, means because he was cast out. And this is confirmed with scripture because, and I'll just scroll back up here, Satan, who deceived the whole world, he was cast out. He was belo. And we'll get into why he was cast out here in a second. So let's scroll back down. So now we're back at that word belo, and the etymology of dea and belo means because he was cast out. And this is when we get into why Satan is called diablos. But now before we get back to diablos, we're still at that Greek reference number 1225, diablo, and we're going to see how this word is used in New Testament scripture. So when you go to Luke chapter 16, verse 1, it says, and he said also unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused. A steward is like a head of a house, kind of like Joseph was in Egypt. He's the head of he was head of an Egyptian house. That's what a steward is. He's the head of the house. And it says the same was accused, and it's that G 1225. So the same was diablo unto him that had wasted his goods. But now what we're finna do, because accused is actually also as a false translation. Again, I tell people all the time that King James Version, Oxford edition of 1769, terrible translation of the Bible. So we're going to take this word diablo and we're going to translate it back to English. And when you translate diablo back to English, and I'm using a Google translator, we get decry. Now, when you look up decry online on Google Dictionary, it means publicly denounce. Don't mean accused. It means guilty, denounce, condemned, criticized. This means David damned. This doesn't mean he's accused of the crime. This means he's already guilty of a crime. So I do not translate this word as accused. I translate it as the same was guilty. The same was condemned unto him that he had wasted his good. He's already guilty of the crime. And just like Satan, he's already guilty of the crime. He is condemned. So again, now we're back at that G 1228. And this is an actual name, Diablos, for the serpent, the cash, or the devil. This is a name, so this would be with a capital D. And the reason Satan is called Diablos is because he is Diablo. He is condemned. He is condemned, and he is cast out. So that is why Satan is called Diablos. So now we're back at Revelations 12, chapter 9. And again, I'm reading from my translation when it says, and that great red dragon was cast out. He was Diablo, that old serpent. So you know it's referring to Nakash, that constellation, called Diablos, not the devil, and Satan. Now we're going to do the same thing, study the root word and etymology of this word Satan. And as you can see, this word Satan is translated from the Greek reference number 4567. I have that Greek reference number pulled up in Strong's already for your convenience. And as you can see, it is translated from the Greek word Satanas. Now, same thing. The root word or etymology is of Aramaic origin or Hebrew origin, corresponding to Satan. And this Greek number is 4566. So we're going to go ahead and click on that Greek number because we're just studying the etymology, the root word. So this is that Greek reference number 4566. This is the Greek word Satan. And as you can see, its root word and etymology comes from the Hebrew origin Satan, which is the Hebrew reference number 7854. So we're finna scroll down. We have that Hebrew reference number pulled up. This is the Hebrew origin for the Greek word Satan. And as you can see, it is still pronounced Satan. So Satan is one of those words that we call a loan word. It is a Hebrew word that has been translated into Greek and English with little or no changes. The word Satan we use today is a Hebrew word. We borrowed it from the Hebrew language. This is Satan in Hebrew. Now, while we in Old Testament scriptures or in the Old Testament word, we're going to look and see how this word Satan is used in the Old Testament. And I have a few scriptures here pulled up, and I'm not going to read through all these. One of the main things you can see is that it is translated in the Old Testament as adversary, 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 adversary. Now, we typically don't use the word adversary in our modern language today. It's not a common word. And it means one's opponent in a contest, conflict, or dispute. Then we have a few synonyms here: opponent, rival, enemy. So I just translate the word Satan into enemy. So when people read it, they understand the meaning. So the first thing we're going to do is go back to that Revelation chapter 12, verses 9, where it says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called Diablos, the enemy, which deceive the whole world. Now we're going to go back to and just describe briefly, how does the enemy, Satan, Diablos, deceives the whole world? And to do that, we're going to go back to Revelation chapter 12, verses 3 through 4. Again, earlier we read two scriptures. One was from Amos, how Elohim established his stories in the heavens. And in Matthew, when Jesus was teaching us how to pray, he said, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So basically, this is an example of how stuff in heaven happens on earth. So Revelation chapter 12, verses 3 through 4, this happens in the constellations. And again, and there appeared another sign in heaven. This is that story in the heavens that is established in the constellations. And behold, a great russet dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. Now, we're finna go to Revelation chapter 17. We're going to read verses 9, 10, and 12 so you can see how this happens in the heavens and what's really taking place on the earth. Again, thy will be done on earth. So this is on earth as it is in heaven. So again, Revelation chapter 17 verse 9 says, and here is the mind which have wisdom. These 7 heads, that's talking about these 7 heads. On earth are 7 mountains on which the woman sit. Now, I'm not going to take a long time explaining how I knew exactly what these 7 mountains is. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you what these 7 mountains is. These 7 mountains is what we call today the 7 mountains of culture, or the 7 mountains of influence. It is talking about art and entertainment, business, education, family, government, media, and religion. So again, how does Satan deceive the whole world? He controls these 7 mountains. He controls arts and entertainment. That's why art and entertainment on TV is so corrupt. Business, that's why business and the economy is so corrupt. Education, this is why the education system is so corrupt, because who controls it? Diablos. This is why there's no more value in family. You have men marrying men, women marrying women. No one wants to have kids anymore. Everybody's condoning abortion. Family has been corrupted by Satan. This is how he deceives the whole world, because he controls these 7 mountains. Government, we all know the government is corrupt. We all know media is corrupt, and we all know religion is corrupt. So the 7 mountains that he sits, having 7 heads, the 7 stars in the constellations, represents the 7 mountains of influence that he controls on the earth. Again, that's called the 7 mountains of influence, or the 7 mountains of culture. Now we're going to verse 10. And again, this is how he deceives the whole world. Through television, through media, through the creation of TV, movies, commercials, all that stuff designed to deceive people. Even when they came out with the patent for the television, the patent on it was for a brainwashing device. The Federal Reserve banking system. A lot of people don't know this. There is nothing government about our Federal Reserve. It is a private business. Why is it private? Because that is Satan, and that is how Satan controls the government. But we're going to continue. Verse 10 says, and there are 7 kings. These 7 kings represents these 7 crowns upon his head, which is corona borealis. So there's 7 kings. And then when you get to verse 12, it says, and the 10 horns. And I'm going to scroll back up. Having, here we go, those 10 horns. It's going to tell you what those 10 horns are on earth. It says the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. So we have 7 kings, and underneath those 7 kings, 10 kings. And it says, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And the beast is the new world order. They receive power as kings 1 hour with the new world order. And basically what I have here is an image of what you call a bullion coin. And this is a new world order bullion coin. You have to look it up, kind of research it yourself. But if you look on the back of the new world order bullion coin, it has the 10 world regions. These are those 10 kings which have received no kingdom yet. These are the 10 kingdom regions on the back of the bullion coin. One is Israel, The second is Europe. The third is the United States of America. The fourth is Russia. But again, that is the New World Order bullion coin. So again, I'm just giving you again how Satan deceives the whole world, and he deceives them with the 7 mountains of influence, and eventually, because he controlled those 7 mountains, Satan is going to control the whole world and deceive the whole world. When you go to Revelations chapter 12, verses 9, again, it says, and that great red dragon was cast out, the old serpents, or the Nakash, called Diablos, the enemy, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth. Now, one of the reason I have this red and bolded is because Nakash, Diablos, the enemy, Satan, he is not from earth. And his angels was cast out with him. These angels that was cast out with him into the earth, they're not from earth. Back to Genesis chapter 3, verses 1. Now, instead of saying now the serpent, we have now Diablos, because we know who that serpent is now. Now Diablos, the one that was cast out, the enemy, your enemy, that great dragon. Now, in the New Testament, and even in the Greek, it used the words dragon. So basically what we're about to do is go over some Old Testament scriptures to confirm that Satan is a dragon, and what word do they use in the Old Testament for dragon, because the word dragon is not really used in the Old Testament to describe a great dragon. They kind of use another word, and we're going to go over that word so you know exactly what the serpent was in the beginning. And to do that, we're going to go to Ezekiel chapter 28. We're going to read verses 13 through 19. And I'm kind of, this is somewhat my translation. I haven't translated it completely, just a few words to help you understand as we go through. And any changes that I made to the King James Version, Oxford edition of 1769, I bolded it so you can recognize I changed something. So, you have been in Eden, the garden of Elohim. And again, when you get to Genesis chapter 3, verses 1, where is this great dragon? He's in Eden, the garden of Elohim. It says, every precious stone was your skin. Now, it gives out a list of stones, and I'm not going to read all of these because I basically have an image of each stone here that it mentions here. Now, the reason it's saying every precious stone was your skin, it is not saying that the serpent was made of these stones. It is just using these stones to describe the color of this dragon's skin. And when you take all these different color stones, basically what you have is the color that we kind of call chameleon. And this is even a chameleon dragon. And as you can see, all of these colors are within this chameleon. So a lot of times when people picture Satan, even in this image I have here, as this scary red ugly dragon, no. If we could have seen Satan in the beginning, he was a beautiful chameleon great dragon. These are called chameleon dragons also, but again, Satan is just a different type of dragon from another planet, and he was chameleon. It says the workmanship of your taberine and of your panpipes were prepared in you the day you were created. Now, that's what this image represents, because when they say panpipes, it's actually talking about the vocal organs of a bird. And all a dragon is a huge bird. As you can see, 2 wings, legs, all a dragon is like an enormous bird. So again, this is why Satan is referred to as being like one of the most beautifulest angels ever, and is associated with singing, because he was a beautiful chameleon color, and he had the panpipes or the vocal organs of a bird. And of course, birds are known for their chipping or singing. Now it gives you the name. It lets you know exactly what the serpent was here in verse 14. It says, "You are the anointed cherub." So in the beginning, this term that we're using for a great dragon, the Old Testament used the word cherub. Cherub is not a little fat kid with blonde hair and wings on his back. That is a kind of a made up cherub. A cherub is a great dragon. Now we're finna go to Ezekiel, beginning with chapter 1, verse 5, so we can get a description of cherubs from the Bible. And then we're going to come back to verse 14. And again at Ezekiel chapter 28, we're going to come back to verse 14. So, also, out of the midst thereof came the likeness of four living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had four faces, and everyone had four wings. And their legs were straight legs. And the sole of their feet was like the sole of an calf's or a cow foot. So basically I have here an image to show you what he was saying and what he was trying to explain. And all this is in this picture is the feet of an ostrich, a giant bird. He had their legs were straight and had the sole of a calf. Again, they're just describing giant birds. It says, and they sparkled like the color of brownish brass. Again, when you go back, it's saying their feet was like the color of brownish brass. That's that russet color again. If you go back up, we had a picture of a car. The color of it was russet. And again, even when you look at the chameleon, and go back to those images above when we went to the color of a wall and the color of an apple, they're russet. This is still would be defined as like that russet wall, all those different colors in that wall. And then we have the russet feet here. It says, and they had, and I'm sorry, I'm going to scroll up really quick just so y'all can see those again. And scroll right back down. There we go. There's that russet wall, the russet apple, and a russet car. And this is like that brownish brass, russet. Again, so that word red dragon is a false translation in Revelations. It's the russet dragon. And they had their hands, and they had the hands of a man under their wings on their four sides. So again, what is this basically describing? Their hands and their wings, kind of like a bat. And then if you can remember, even if you look at a bat where he got his wings open, the hands of a man in the corner of his wings, he had, look, a bat has those straight feet and have the resemblance of a man because you have legs, arms, chest, muscles, a head, a resemblance of a man. And they four had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. It means they had four wings, but they was connected. They turned not when they went. They went everyone straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they four had the faces of a man. And again, that's why I say the resemblance of a man, because one of those faces was like the faces of a man, the face of a lion. And on the right side, and they four had the face of an ox on the left side, and they four also had the faces of an eagle. Thus, now these cherubims are described with having four faces on their head. All cherubims are not described as having four faces on their head. These are just these particular kinds of cherubs here. Verse 11 says, thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. Two wings of every one were joined one to another, so their top wings was all connected, and two covered their bodies. Now from here, we just jump into Ezekiel chapter 10, verses 20 through 22, because he's still describing cherubs in these verses. And I just want y'all to have a description of these cherubs, or these great dragons that's from another planet. Verse 12, Ezekiel 10. Well, I guess I have verse 12 here, then verse 20 through 22. It says, and their whole body, and their backs, and their hands, and their wings, and their wheels were full of ocelus around about. Now, the King James Version Bible says eyes. The reason I use ocelus is because if you look up the definition of ocelus, as you can see, it means the same thing as an eye, a simple eye or an eye spot. And the reason I use ocelus instead of eye, because when most people read this particular verse, when they read eyes, they think of like eyes of like a human being. And these are not talking about eyes like a human being, but like the ocelus, or the eye spots on an peacock. They was full of these peacock eyes, just like peacock feathers. They was covered in the same thing. Why? Because these are just giant birds from another planet, though. Now, verse 20 says, this is the living creature that I saw under Elohim of Israel by the river of Chebar, and I knew that they were the cherubim. So again, he's describing, so you know he's describing these as cherubims. And what are cherubims? They are nothing but dragons or giant birds. But again, they're from another planet. They're not from Earth. Verse 21 says, everyone had 4 faces apiece, and everyone 4 wings, and the likeness of their hands of a man was under their wings. Again, I just showed you the image of that. Likeness of a man's hands underneath their wings. In other words, when their wings are closed, you can't see the hands. You can't see the likenesses of the man's hands. You got to be looking under the wings. And the likeness of their faces was the same faces which I saw by the river of Chebar. Their appearance and themselves, they went everyone straight forward. Now from here we jump into Revelation chapter 4, verses 6 to 8, because they also describe cherubs in these verses. It says, and before the throne, this is talking about the throne of Elohim, there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and around about the throne were 4 beasts, full of ocelus. They was full of those peacock eyes, before and behind, because these are cherubims that is even around the throne of Elohim in heaven. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had the face of a man. Now, if you notice, these beasts or these cherubs only have 1 face. They don't have 4 faces like the ones in Ezekiel. And the fourth beast was like a flying eagle, and the 4 beasts had each of them 6 wings. Now here they have 6 wings instead of 4 wings about him, and they were full of. And I want to change this really quick. Ocelus within. So they was covered in these peacock eyes. Why? Because they was just giant birds. Now we getting back to Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 14, where we left off, when it says, you are that anointed cherub. And again, it's talking to the serpent that was cast out of heaven. So again, Satan was a cherub that sat over the throne of God. And this is why I say the cherub that covers. And I have set you so. And again, just to go over that cherub that covers, even when you go back to Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 22 to 23, it says, and the likeness of the atmosphere upon the heads of the living creature was as the color of a terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above, and under the atmosphere were their wings straight, the one towards the other. Every one had 2 which covered, and that's why he's calling him the cherub that covered. Their wings covered on this side, and everyone had 2 which covered on that side their bodies. I'll try to mention this really quick. Sorry if you're not familiar with the Bible. Even when you go back to the Old Testament, when they first built the temple, when King Solomon first built the temple, the room that the Ark of the Covenant was in was covered with two large cherubims. And even the mercy seat that was above the ark had two cherubs that kind of covered where Christ's voice would kind of appear from. And it was symbolic for his throne in heaven, because his throne in heaven is covered by cherubs. And again, this Satan used to be one of these beautiful cherubs that covered. It says, "You was upon the holy mountain of Elohim. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire." In other words, he was among the other cherubs. "You was perfect in all your ways from the day you was created, till iniquity was found in you." So there was some iniquity found in him, and we're going to get more into that iniquity that was found in him in the end of the next lesson. It says, "By the multitude of your merchandise, they have filled the midst of you with violence." This iniquity that was found in him caused him to do some very violent things, or start thinking about some very violent things. "And you have sinned. Therefore I cast you as profane out of the mountain of Elohim." He's cast out from among those other cherubs, and not only him, but his angels also, or his other. When they say his angels, it's talking about the other cherubs that he was in charge of. It says, "And I will destroy you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire." Verse 17 says, "Thine heart was lifted up because of your beauty." So this is why his heart was lifted up, and we just went over how beautiful he was. "You have corrupted your wisdom." So Satan was extremely smart. He was created smart, but he corrupted that wisdom, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next lesson also. "By reason of your brightness." Now, when you go to Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 14, it talks about this also. It says, "How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" Now, the word Lucifer is also not in the Hebrew text. It's kind of added in the King James Version Bible. The word that was here in the Hebrew was, you kind of pronounce it, I believe, like Halael. And again, "How are you cut down to the ground? Because he was cast out of the heavens to the earth, which did weaken the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Elohim." So now I'm going to explain to you what verse 13 means. When you go back to this picture, remember, this is Nakash. Now, the stars of Elohim is the constellation Virgo and Leo. This constellation Leo kind of represents a crown over Virgo. And the reason he wants to ascend into heaven and exalt his throne is represented by the constellation Nakash and Corona Borealis. But if you notice, it's under the feet of Virgo and Leo, which represents Israel. So he wants to exalt his throne above Israel. When you go to Revelations 12 and 1, it says, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman." That woman is the constellation Virgo. It says, "Underneath the sun is above her shoulder, with the moon under her feet." The moon is under the feet of Virgo. "And a crown of 12 stars above her head." The constellation Leo is typically 9 stars, but on September 23rd, 2017, during this alignment in the fulfillment of Revelations chapter 12, verses 1 through 2, you have Venus, Mars, and Mercury accompanied with Leo to make it a crown of 12 stars. And another thing to just pay attention to is that Venus, Mars, Mercury, the Sun, Jupiter, and the Moon is all in a straight line. And again, the fulfillment of that prophecy, Revelation 12, chapter 1 through 2, happened on September 23rd, 2017. And this is how we know we're in the book of Revelations. But now I'm going back to verse Isaiah 13 here. It says, "I will sit." This is the serpent, or Satan, talking from his heart. "I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north." And this is just talking about upon the Temple Mount. The temple that Solomon built or Israel built after the 70 years of captivity in Babylon was not on the Temple Mount. This is where Satan wants to build his throne, on the Temple Mount. The temple that they built was in the city of David, which is below the Temple Mount. And again, this is just Satan represents how he wants to sit over the nation of Israel. He don't wants to be under their feet. He want to sit. He want to basically Israel to worship him. And when you go to verse 14, it says that I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like Elyon. Satan does not want to be submissive to Israel. He wants to sit above Israel and be worshipped by Israel instead of him worshiping Israel. And we'll get into that again a little bit more into the next lesson. So we're back at Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 13 through 19. We left off at verse 17, where it's saying, I will cast you to the earth. I will lay you before kings, that they may behold you. Again, when you go to Isaiah chapter 14, 15 and 16, it says, yet he shall be brought down to Shiloh. And this is like below the earth, deep in the earth, to the sides of the pit. That's like talking about that earth's crust, that hot core in the center of the earth. They that see you shall narrowly look upon you and consider you, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble and did shake kingdoms? And again, this is just back into reference. When you say, I will cast you to the earth, I will lay you before kings, that they may behold you. Verse 18 says, you have defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your merchandise. Therefore, I will bring forth a fire from the midst of you, and it shall devour you. And I will bring you to ashes upon the earth, and upon the earth in the sight of all them that see you. And they that know you among the people shall be astonished at you. Ye shall be a terror, and never shall ye be any more. And with that being said, this concludes this gospel.